All right. Whew, gotta get hyped. Gotta get hyped. Get the squats in. Get the fucking ninja kicks in, dude. Got it. Oh, fuck. Okay, that's all I can do. That's all I can do. All right. Are you ready, brother? Good thing I do all this dumb shit before I actually start recording. All right, let's do it. We're going to go ahead and get started in 5, 4, 3, 2, and... Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And it is finally time. My old god following children. Today, we are going to discuss the Queen Azshara death cinematic from the end of the Eternal Palace raid. But before we jump into it, I want to let everybody know, because I think that this is important for the integrity of the video, that you understand that I have not watched anybody else's cinematic analysis, and it's been killing me, because I love to watch Taliesin's cinematic analysis, and I haven't been able to watch it, because I just didn't want his opinions and observations to affect what I am going to say. Lost Codex has done one, several others have done one, but I refuse to watch, and I'm sorry that you've had to wait this long to get mine. But I'm excited to be able to watch other videos after this, so I'm hoping that I have some original things to say. Should it so happen that I say something that someone else has said, no shit, we're both watching the same cinematic. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, I have the cinematic pulled up here on YouTube, on the official World of Warcraft page. We're just going to start it. I'm going to pause at certain parts. We're going to talk about certain things. I'm going to play certain things in slow motion. And you guys sit back, relax, and enjoy. So, start with this. Does that remind you of anything? Because it certainly reminded me of something. Her shallow breathing, her claws scraping on the ground, reminded me immediately of the fish from the Azshara Warbringer cinematic. The fish out of water, gasping. I think that's what a gasping fish looks like. Gasping for air because it's on the brink of its final breath. Its final moments. You know, the fish is completely out of water. It's struggling to survive. And one thing that also kind of reminded me of the Azshara cinematic, or Warbringer cinematic, is her claws scraping on the ground. I think that's to illustrate her being in pain and her kind of failing, her tensing up, so to speak. But it also reminded me of the sound that is made when she's holding up the barrier, trying to protect her people. And the fish is like, let go. And she's like, no, I am queen. And her eyes like flare with light, you know, like the pride within her that is just flaring out, you know, because she's queen. She's so proud of what she is and who she is. But the cracking sound of the barrier starting to fail kind of reminds me of her scraping her claws on the ground here. And then it's immediately followed up with her eyes looking, she looks, how I would describe this as basically almost hopeless and kind of thinking, searching for anything that she can do to be sustained and not fail in this moment and to die here. She, it's like eyes of desperation, basically, and defeat, which is something we haven't seen much from Queen Azshara. However, it does get a very nice close-up on her eyes, and they're pretty obviously at this point almost identical with the eye of N'Zoth that we've been seeing. Which, by the way, I want to point out once again, just happens to be the same eye that shows up in Sargeras' sword, and has been in Sargeras' sword since, I don't know, pretty much the beginning of all art of Sargeras' sword, so probably, you know, a coincidence. And in the water in front of her, again, we see another reflection. This is something that's actually illustrated once again in the Azshara Warbringer cinematic, where when looking at the fish, she sees the reflection of herself in the water and in the fish's eye, where we see the red circle, you know. I think that it is slightly symbolic, but in the sense that she's kind of looking at herself failing initially. She can see herself trying to sustain this barrier. the fish kind of telling her to let go. At this point, she's holding on once again, peering into the reflection, but this time not seeing herself, seeing lor'themar, Theron, and Jaina. I think this could kind of be illustrative of, like, who is the cause of her downfall in these situations. I mean, we showed up, we defeated Queen Azshara, Jaina and lor'themar were present for this clearly. They kind of helped to bring about the downfall of Queen Azshara. But in the first cinematic, in the Warbringer cinematic, who really is to blame? Whose fault is it that Queen Azshara drowned and all of her people drowned with her? It's Queen Azshara's fault, and I think that this is kind of illustrated in the reflection. It's kind of putting emphasis on really who caused this, to an extent. She peers up and you get a nice little view of Jaina looking down upon her and lor'themar cautiously approaching. Surely they both can kind of fathom the power of Queen Azshara having just fought her, and you can see the chain dangling behind them. Now, I want to point out, when it comes to the platform that you fight Queen Azshara on, obviously a Titan facility. People have been asking me, Pyro, what do you think the facility is that Mother told us to stay away from? You know, in some of her most recent dialogue, she discovers an unknown Titan facility and recommends that we stay away from it. That would be this Titan facility. It's pretty evident that this is all Titan architecture, and if it is the last prison, as it's described by the text when you enter the room, I mean, this is obviously a Titan facility, and what we're about to witness is further evidence of that. I think that this is probably the Titan facility that Mother cautioned us to stay away from. I also want to point out this kind of flowing background behind them. You can kind of see this blue flowing energy. That looks pretty familiar. If you guys think back to the fight mechanics for Argus the Unmaker, that kind of blue wisping kind of energy looks pretty familiar. But in this moment, we see Queen Azshara look up at her betters, and she just kind of collapses in front of them. The hollow thud on the ground. We get this nice incremental zoom in of this Titan machine. Now, this thing right here, this is a very familiar thing that we've seen in the game. This is actually the same visual depiction as the Eye of Aman'Thul. And we've actually seen this not only on the door that exists in the Chamber of Heart, where Magni and, you know, Mother are at. We've actually seen this on top of the Nighthold too. And these same Titan runes, we have seen those many, many times on different Titan artifacts and different Titan facilities. But it's evident that what we're doing, or what we did during this fight, seemingly has caused this mechanism to be filled with azurite, or empowered with azurite, to glow blue, which I think is very interesting. This blue glow, because azurite is gold and blue. I have proposed several times that I think that azurite is not just the blood of creation, Azeroth, who I believe is the Titan of creation and light, but also destruction, shadow, the blood of Argus, the Unmaker. And I think that it got there because Sargeras took that giant sword and stabbed it into Azeroth. And I think that that sword had the soul and potentially, additionally, the blood of Argus kind of infused into it. And I think azurite is the combination of both the blood of Azeroth and the blood of Argus, and I think they are come together to be one as creation and destruction. This is a tangent, but this is further backed by how Sylvanas describes her reaction to azurite, where in the Before the Storm book, it reads that Sylvanas, when she touched azurite, she felt as though she was a goddess of creation and destruction. Light and shadow. By the way, the classic or vanilla description of what priests wielded, light and shadow, says that they wielded the forces of creation and destruction. But, you know, we're supposed to believe holy light and void are the creator forces of the cosmos. My ass. Anyway, let's continue. And then, here, this is very important. We're in a Titan facility, right? Sometimes, I mean, think about this. Think about Uldir. When the wing that Vectis was in was breached and Vectis was able to escape the containment pod which it was in, a lot of the Titan architecture in there started to glow red. I think that when you think about other sci-fi and just in general, warning signs, red is typically one of the things that is associated with them. So it could just be that all of this has turned red because it knows that something is now wrong, probably the facility indicating that something is about to open up. I'm going to play this very slowly here for you because I think this part's very cool and interesting. So it starts to glow blue, and then from the cracks it glows a very bright white, and then from there you can kind of see yellow start to creep through. So I'm going to go frame by frame on this, and you see on the bottom left, gold starts to flow out. On the bottom right, the blue starts to flow out. It's as if these two particular colors have been meaningfully and intentionally separated in some capacity. That is to say that I don't think that this prison could have been opened without the blood of Azeroth. Again, further kind of reinforcing this idea that what Sargeras did with his sword is actually almost directly responsible for this lock's ability to even be opened. To even open this lock, I think the world had to, what happened had to have happened. It was pretty much required. You have the gold in the left, the blue in the right, and then in the top, a brilliant white. I'm not really entirely sure what that is supposed to represent. Maybe you have kind of the gold light and then the blue kind of shadow, or even blue light, if you will. And the top is this kind of radiant, potentially holy light as part of the mechanism. I'm not really sure what that is meant to represent, but we clearly have three different colors that are happening here. And they explode outward. And the interesting thing about this explosion is, as light tends to in the Warcraft universe, we've noticed several times, along the edges of it, you get this prismatic effect, the rainbow, anywhere from violet all the way, through red, green, yellow, orange, blue, indigo, and all those colors. It explodes in this brilliant, bright explosion. And to me, I thought that this kind of looked like fire, personally. It does look a little bit like fire. We do know that Azerite can be used for flammable weaponry, and it can be used for explosive ordnance as well. So the fact that it could explode in like a type of a fire is not necessarily surprising, but it does explode outwards. This I thought was really interesting. As it's exploding outwards, it does continue to look like flame, if you ask me, especially along the edges of the screen here to the left. But not only that, it doesn't harm Jaina or lor'themar. Sure, it kind of blows them back. It doesn't harm them. But specifically, this Azerite explosion, if we continue, does harm one specific thing. And that is these chains, which are starting to very brightly glow, by the way. It obviously erupts out, smashes into these chains. They kind of shake, and then they shatter. Now, these chains, we have seen these before. Of course, they were in the prison of Yogg-Saron. That was the prison of Yogg-Saron, by the way, which we fought Yogg-Saron in. These were the chains that held the heart of Y'Shaarj and its containment cell in place in the Mists of Pandaria. And I believe that you actually see these inside Frostmourne. I want to say when you go inside Frostmourne, you actually see these as well. Which, again, I think that's pretty interesting. We're going to go back a couple frames here, because I want you guys to see this explosion that happens as the Azerite flows outwards. So we have this pretty huge pulse, incredibly bright, by the way. Azerite causes such bright reactions to happen. I think that's very important. You can kind of see the distortion of the water around the bubble because of the explosion. It's just radiating, just brilliantly bright. And this is something, other people pointed out. This Titan facility, which, by the way, it just, I don't know, could be coincidental, but is perfectly themed in color and architectural style to the things that we see in Elunaria, where we save Aenar the Lifebinder from. And specifically in areas like the Halls of Lightning, we see the same kind of architecture, where we also see these green kind of almost life-looking orbs all around the place. We also see this type of Titan architecture, specifically this kind of burgundy-ish, I don't know if I'd call it burgundy, this kind of like reddish brown and gold color scheme. We see that also in, I believe, in Ulduar in certain spots. But people pointed out that the machinery starts to glow red. Again, that could be some kind of indication of warning or a breach of some kind, considering that we are basically opening up a prison right now, as far as we are aware. Nothing else takes any damage. This explosion seemingly only affects these spectral chains. I have to throw this out there. I think that in Chronicle, it describes when the old gods were imprisoned. First off, it says N'Zoth was buried underground. That's clearly not true. Not only that, it also says that they were bound with magical enchantments. They basically enchanted these prisons in some capacity. It would seem to me that these spectral chains are that which they have been bound by. Now, this is random, but one thing that happens to chains over time, which is kind of unavoidable, is that they kind of start to, well, depending on the kind of chain, rust and deteriorate away, and in time, chains will break. I have to wonder if these kind of chains can have that happen to them. I'm not sure that these chains, if they were never physically and forcefully broken by whatever we're doing here, I'm not so sure that these chains would ever break. They seem to be some kind of spectral, otherworldly kind of chains. And if there was one Titan Keeper who did this, I would assume that it was probably Loken. He is the direct keeper of Norgannon, the Dreamweaver, and Norgannon does seem to be closely associated with Algalon, Harboron, Elagon. There's a very clear naming scheme here, all of which share the exact same color scheme and kind of general design as these chains. So with that being said, I do think it's fascinating that this explosion did nothing to anything other than the chains directly, and I'm not really sure why that is. I want to take a step back as well. This red color scheme, the shift from blue, as we see in the background here, to this red, I want to remind you guys, we've seen that happen before. It was Argus the Unmaker on the Mythic mode, where the canon version of the fight, where you fight Argus, where he's blue and gold, and then Aman'Thul, by the way, this looks like the Eye of Aman'Thul, blasts Argus with time magic, and then Argus turns black and red. Again, I do believe Argus is the Titan of Death. I believe he has existed for a hell of a long time and was specifically left out of Chronicle for a very intentional reason. And I do think that he is meant to represent Shadow. I have also said for a long time, specifically because of the tie-ins with Deathwing, that I think that N'Zoth is inherently linked to Shadow, Death, and actually Argus directly. Let's move on. We're going to play this. You have the red lights shining up in the ocean as well. Now we have this incredible darkness shooting up. A couple things to note about this. Black and red, again, come on, dude. Pretty clear visual theme happening here. At this point, you can also see that the Titan faces on the facility have illuminated with red eyes, and the majority of the platform has also illuminated with a glowing red kind of light. Here's the thing. This contrast that they're drawing with the red and the black, I don't think that's an accident. But there's something that happens very quickly here. I don't know if anybody else noticed this. Lumino pointed this out to me. Lumino is one of my main people that I speculate with personally, and Lumino is a fucking genius. Watch this. Check this out. So you see this massive eye open up down here. Now, based on the silhouette, this doesn't, I don't know, it almost doesn't look like it's attached to the main body of something else. I also would ask you, what exactly were these chains holding? Because what we're witnessing here is this eye opening up. Were the chains all holding the eye shut? Because the way that the chains are aligned that wouldn't really make sense. So I don't really understand how breaking the chains allowed this to happen. But you have this thing open up that it looks like an eye. It could be some kind of door or gate. But you see this pupil, this very dark iris in the center open up, and it gets very bright, very fucking bright. By the way, again, this burning eye looks very similar to what you see in Sargeras' sword in the artwork of him. Again, I will reiterate, I do believe Sargeras had a pact with N'Zoth, and that the Burning Legion was actually working with N'Zoth. And I think that pact was made because of Sargeras' involvement with Argus. Again, I do think this all ties together, and Deathwing is a pretty important hint. So you see this, the iris kind of shrink a little bit, and it becomes so bright, so incredibly bright, that there becomes a point right here where you can no longer see that black portion. But you know what you do see. As soon as that black thing goes away, literally the next frame, you can see it appear here. There's nothing here. But now, the next frame, you can see the shadow starting to fly up. What if I told you that this dark shadow that we see flying up is the darkness within the center of the eye? I'm telling you, this darkness that you see in this iris, that's the darkness that we're seeing come flying out of there. as the light completely illuminates and the darkness disappears, it starts to fly up. And I believe that's because it's literally coming out of what we're looking at. But let's continue. It continues to fly up to the top of the platform. And I love how quickly it moves. I also want to point out, this is no old god tentacle. Come on, dude. That is pure fucking shadowy darkness. I don't know what that is, but that is not an old god tentacle. And it is certainly not void either. You know what this reminds me of a lot? This actually reminds me a lot of Sylvanas' Banshee form as we see it illustrated in the Battle for Lordaeron cinematic. The smoke and darkness emanating from her looks very similar to actually to what we're witnessing right here. And once again, Sylvanas' clear... I don't know if she's following N'Zoth, if she's serving him, if she is partnered with him in some capacity. But Sylvanas' clear ties with N'Zoth make me wonder what really all lies within Sylvanas' Banshee powers. And remember, Sylvanas doesn't turn into a Banshee without Arthas, which doesn't happen without the Legion. You remember the Legion who wants to, bring about the end of all things, it would seem. A thing that Argus can do, and something that Deathwing actually called himself, the unmaker of worlds and end of all things. I don't know, maybe things just tie together accidentally like this, but you see this pure darkness just flying up. I love this. It just bursts through this barrier, and the animation for when this happens looks freaking amazing. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this frame by frame here. Oh, hold on, let me turn that audio off. That's terrible. Watch it just burst through this bright, kind of blasting light. You can kind of see the light of the barrier, if that's what this is, kind of penetrating the shadow for a second, but after it penetrates all the way through, which it just straight blasts through it, it just floats there ominously. I love this part where it just comes in, and it's so... This is freaky. Like, this would be terrifying. I love the ominous float. It bursts in and then it's just kind of floating there for a second. Then you see this dark, shadowy kind of hand reaching out from it. I love this shot. And I want to point out something. When I say that this is shadow, that is to say that it's not void. I strictly and very strongly believe that shadow and void are two separate forces. And people can argue that if they want. I understand why you would. But void seems to be either undead light or the absence of all light. Here's the thing about shadow. Shadow, by nature, kind of implies the existence of light. Void, being potentially the absence of all light, would kind of imply no light. So here's the thing. Shadow and void, I don't believe are the same thing. I think things like pestilence and death and decay and famine and those kinds of things should be associated, and disease should be associated with shadow. Think Death Knight. Think... necromancy to an extent, even though I think necromancy is an arcane art. Think of it that way. Bwonsamdi kind of shit, Sylvanas kind of shit, death related shadow stuff. Void, I think, is much more about your sanity and your mind, and void is also generally depicted with white speckles like stars strewn all throughout it. It's kind of shapeless and formless, whereas this is actually taking a direct form. And the void is seeming... Think about Shadow Priest. You exist as a Shadow Priest. You have shadow spells like Shadow Word Pain, Shadow Word Death, but you have to actually go into void form to use almost all your void abilities. Also, read the description for Shadow Priest. The class description literally says it uses shadow magic and void magic, as if to separate the two in essence of what they are. The reason I'm honing in on this so much is because I'm trying to reinforce the idea that shadow and void are not the same, and I don't believe that what we're witnessing here is void. I think this is definitely shadow, and there's even more here that will kind of support that as we move along, so let's continue. Immediately reaches forward, goes right past Jaina and lor'themar. Whatever this is probably could have instantly killed them. And at this point, you guys, I'm sorry, but I'm not even so sure that N'Zoth is even an old god at this point. And the way that we're seeing the power of N'Zoth here manifesting, I don't know about this. This is not like Yogg-Saron. This is not like Y'Shaarj. This is not like Cthulhu. This is some different shit. And this is immensely powerful. But it goes right past them. Grabs around Queen Azshara, quite gently, I might add. You kind of hear the whispering of the shadow in the background. People have been saying, is Queen Azshara being betrayed here? Doesn't really seem like betrayal, because what you're about to witness is a true, direct resurrection. And not like an undead, not like Calumenethil, not like a Forsaken, and not like Sylvanas. We watch a character who we just witnessed die be brought back from the other side by N'Zoth. That is very important, and I'm going to explain to you in a second why. But he kind of gently holds her up. Boom. Queen Azshara has been brought back to life. And the look on her face depicts what? Horror, terror, shock. I would wager that it's possible that Queen Azshara saw on wherever she just went. She may have seen the other side that Sylvanas also saw when Sylvanas jumped off of Icecrown Citadel. And this vision that Sylvanas had terrified her. And Sylvanas did die, by the way. The Valkyr brought her back, but that she did die when she jumped off. It was not merely a vision. But what Sylvanas saw, according to the actual scripture, when you read Edge of Night, which is a free short story, you can all go read it on the World of Warcraft website, but I know only like 1% of you will. There's a link in the description below. Specifically pages, I believe it's page 5 or maybe page 6 that actually talks about what Sylvanas saw. It's not describing the Shadowlands, my friends. It's describing, and I quote, the infinite void. Whatever Sylvanas is witnessing on the other side was not the realm of death and shadow. Sylvanas was witnessing the maddening, terrifying, infinite, and endless darkness that is the void, the all-consuming, mind-shattering void. And I think it's possible, as it terrified Sylvanas, it also terrified Queen Azshara. But then instantaneously, she is ripped out into the water and into the darkness. I also think that this shares a very similar correlation to the original Azshara Warbringer cinematic, where as she fails to hold up the barrier, the water crashes in around her and her face is lost, and you can see her eyes glowing as darkness surrounds her. It's a very similar picture which we're seeing here. Again, from an actual framing and cinematic standpoint, there's some pretty strong similarities happening. We instantly see the shadow withdraw from the platform. Now that's a good shot. Super bright, very bright. Now this could just be because of, as the shadow came in, we had that bright explosion. As the shadow went out, perhaps the same thing was happening. But I'm curious if this is almost to illustrate that the barrier which we are witnessing is in some capacity light, and even this shadow which we're witnessing is piercing through it. But also, I saw Perculia said, I think it was on Twitter, this reminds me of, seeing the star, the red star in the sky, closing after the whole Argus thing happened. This also reminds me very strongly of the world soul of Argus when it's being influenced by Sargeras at the seat of the Pantheon. It glows incredibly brightly. It also reminds me of what Gul'dan saw through the portal right before he died, almost as if Gul'dan looked directly at death and then almost immediately after was killed. This right here I think is definitely symbolic, and while I might not have an exact pinpoint on what I think it is meant to represent, I do think that this is meaningful, and I think that they put this in here for a very good reason. We're going to watch this part just in slow-mo for a second. So I want you to watch it dissipate. You kind of see it, the sparkles kind of fade, you kind of see the spectral light kind of below once again, and it kind of ripples across. So maybe that is to say that this barrier in essence is kind of spectral or arcane or celestial, even is probably the word I should use, celestial, in the same manner that things like Norgannon, Algalon, and those chains are. You also see that the lights above the pillars, if my camera wasn't in the way, have actually returned to their normal state of blue, which again I'm really not sure why that's happening. Kind of freaky. However, you also see, as N'Zoth finishes his little thing here, all eyes shall be open. You see the eyes of these mechanisms fade away. People are asking me what that means. Honestly, I'm not really sure. N'Zoth's very foreboding quote right here could imply a couple things. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, I haven't watched Taliesin's I haven't watched his video, but I've seen the thumbnail and I saw the original, I saw the title. So I can kind of derive what Taliesin is getting at in the video. Taliesin believes that this is kind of suggesting that all of the old gods will be resurrected. And I'm assuming that's what he's saying. Potentially, yeah. I mean, that's possible. I have been saying for a while now that after death in World of Warcraft, that's not the end. And as Il'gynoth says, he journeys to Ny'alotha. It's possible that the other old gods, even Y'Shaarj, could have in some capacity gone to wherever Ny'alotha is, which I will continue to say is in the Shadowlands if it is not directly the name of the Shadowlands. Ny'alotha, like, think of it as like the land of the dead. Even though it calls it a city, who fucking knows? Maybe the whole of the Shadowlands is where the Black Empire is residing. Maybe the Titans put the Black Empire into the Shadowlands, or maybe that's where it truly originated from in the first place. I'm not really sure. With that being said, what does N'Zoth mean by those words? Well, what do we see happen to Queen Azshara? Her eyes are shut. Now her eyes are open. It kind of would seem that Queen Azshara is dead and is resurrected, thus literally having her eyes opened. And it could be taken in a very literal sense in that, yes, someone or something or maybe a bunch of things are going to be resurrected. Maybe anything that ever worked with N'Zoth, like, I don't know, Deathwing, considering we know the Black Dragonflight is going to have a storyline coming up, could be resurrected. I also don't think Deathwing is entirely and truly gone, considering we killed him right above the Maelstrom, which canonically should be similar in location to where the hell we are right now. But I digress. I don't know. It could be... Here's what I think. I think that whatever Queen Azshara saw on the other side was kind of eye-opening for her. And it could be this kind of subtle nod at the idea that in death, you have your eyes opened to a truth. Something is not right on the other side. I'm telling you guys, something is wrong. And I think that in the realm of death, the Shadowlands, I think something is very wrong. I'm gonna throw this out there as a very early speculation, and I'll elaborate more on this in another video. I think it's possible that the Void, which eats souls, might be trying to eat the Shadowlands. That would be fucking awful. If that happened, anything that died could potentially be sent to the Void and could never, ever, ever get out. That's a nightmare. That is absolute worst case scenario. That cannot happen. If the Void, in its own essence, literally found a way into the Shadowlands and began to consume it and eat the souls that exist in the Shadowlands, though, that's really bad. I don't even want to think about that. And I'm going to be honest with you. As I've said before, I think we are going to go to Ny'alotha, and I think that the way we get there will be through a doorway, and that doorway likely will be death. And when we go, I think we're going to be exposed to a very powerful truth, potentially the truth of shadow, and our eyes will be opened. One other thing that I want to touch on before I point out something very important is that Queen Azshara is dragged off into the darkness, and they were saying that at the end of this cinematic, we would know who the final boss of BFA would be. So realistically, at this point, we have two options. It could be N'Zoth, or that dark shadow, whatever the fuck that is, or it could be Queen Azshara. I think it'd be kind of lame if it was Queen Azshara because we already literally just fought her, and not many bosses have we ever fought twice, let alone in the same expansion. So I kind of find that to be a little unlikely. Sure, it could be like super N'Zoth empowered Queen Azshara, but as far as we're aware, she's already pretty empowered. So I'm really not sure. Maybe he brought her back, as people are speculating it could be her third death. The first when she drowned, the second just now. Maybe at her third death, she ushers in their coming in some kind of way that is just super powerful. Considering that old god whispers are supposed to be half-truths, you could take it as this way. At the hour of her, Queen Azshara, third death, she, Sylvanas, ushers in our coming. There could be something going on with that. Or both parts, her and she, could be referring both to Queen Azshara. I don't know. Another thing is that people have been asking, because of my theory of Sylvanas wanting to potentially put Azshara into the Black Blade, The sound of Queen Azshara being resurrected, some people think that sounds like a knife being stabbed into her. No, I don't think, like, maybe it could be in some way like a hint at that, but I don't think that that's actually what happened in any capacity. Like, Sylvanas is clearly not here. There's clearly no blade, so I don't really know where that comes from. I think we should, like, probably take a step back on that one. But one other thing, I want to finish the video on this, because that's the whole cinematic. What we're witnessing with Queen Azshara, as I pointed out, is a tried and true resurrection. This is not undead or necromantic resurrection. This is not a resurrection via the holy light. This is a darkness, a shadow, resurrecting someone. And here's the deal. There's not many beings in World of Warcraft that can do that, and not that instantaneously either. But there is one who was literally used as a shadow conduit for the resurrection of an entire army, time and time again, for millennia untold. And his name is Argus the Unmaker, and he is the shadow by which Sargeras resurrected the demons of the Burning Legion at such a rapid rate. So what I'm basically getting at is that one of the only beings we've ever seen do any kind of shadow-based instantaneous or at least rapid resurrection like that, something that would probably strike terror and fear into the heart of whoever was being influenced by such forces, is Argus, the darkness, the shadow that is to come to reap all that live on this world. Is that edgy enough for you? But that's pretty much it. I thought this was a great cinematic. There's a ton of people that were upset at the cinematic. What? This is one of the coolest cinematics we've had in forever. Great fucking job, by the way, Tara and Gregory and the cinematic team. I'm very impressed at what you're able to do with in-game models and stuff like this. I'm very impressed. This was excellent. And people are like, well, didn't answer the questions. No shit. Welcome to World of Warcraft, dude. The story's been going on for over 15 years. You're not going to have all your questions answered in a matter of a minute and 22 seconds. Of course, they're going to keep cock-teasing us. It's only patch 8.2. We got old gods to come. We got black dragons to come. We got potentially infinite and more Twilight. We got the end of all things and Nyalotha to come. You know not what is to come, but Sylvanas does. So we'll see how she reacts to that. If you guys like this video, please do drop a like on the video, as it's the best way to let me know that you enjoy my content and the best way to support me as a content creator here on YouTube, besides Patreon, which you can throw a couple dollars at me every month if you want to. There's a link to that down in the description below. And you do get a special Discord rank in my Discord, which there will also be a link to down in the description below for being a patron. If you guys have not subscribed to my channel already, please do hit that subscribe button, because who knows if you'll ever find one of my videos again. And if you enjoyed this today, I'm sure you will probably enjoy my previous videos and what is to come when it is time. The last thing I'll let you guys know about is I do have a Twitter and I do have a twitch.tv stream where I actually stream World of Warcraft stuff. We do live speculation and I interact a lot with the chat. It's kind of something you have to do as a Warcraft streamer, and I love the fuck out of it. So if you guys wouldn't mind following me at twitch.tv/Pyromancer and twitter.com/PyromancerSarg, S-A-R-G, like Sargeras. Get it? Get it? That's everything, guys. I love and appreciate you very much. Thank you so much for watching this. Stay awesome, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace!